Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is October 14, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Leo J. Fahey. Is that the proper way to pronounce it?
Yep, that is.
Where in the heck you calling in from, Leo?
Okay, I'm in a place. Well, first of all, I'm at home, and the place of home is called Breezy Point. It's in the New York City borough of Queens. And of course, that's in the great state of New York.
How cool. Now, the first question is, Leo, what's the best thing for a human being?
Oh, geez. The best, that's to me very difficult because I suspect the best thing for a human being, it's got to be companionship. We are
Yeah.
social creatures after all, and a loving, caring companion is, I think, I mean, obviously there's food and shelter and that sort of physical kind of thing, but it's that caring individual who is going to be there with you with trials and joys and everything. I think that's probably the best.
Beautiful. I agree with you. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Again, you ask very difficult questions because I'm both oral and literate. So at this point, I use both equally. So I read and I listen and I speak. One of the good things about being an educator is that you do all three at times simultaneously, in the sense that you're in a classroom, you have already read whatever it is that you're going to present, or the background that you have, and then you have a conversation. You listen to students, you listen to yourself, and you are able then to talk with them. So all three are ways by which equally information comes in.
Leo, thanks. You're really articulate, and I feel that you're communicating to me well. I'm getting it. But just to divert from that on reading, did you become a reading more because your parents did it as an example? They told you to, or on your own?
My suspicion is that it is both. My father was a secondary education English teacher. So obviously there were books all over the place. My mother first started out as a registered nurse, then went to teaching. And again, she was a reader as well. But
Yeah.
I think it takes more than just the environment. It takes a sense of curiosity, a sense of wanting to know more than what your senses are telling you. So I think even though there was an environment that put books in front of me, that put literature in front of me, I think I gravitated towards reading because there was a great need to know.
Yeah. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Same way people gather friends, they gather toys, they gather. It is part of human nature to be able to gather around, whether it be a family, whether it be pieces of information, whether it be toys, as I said, stamps, or any other thing that allows people to uh, to be connected
Yeah.
with the things of the world.
Really well put. Do thoughts create emotions?
Ah, um, okay. I'm of the school that says feelings come first,
Yeah.
and that although if you take one step back, one could make an argument that if you do, that language comes first. And then it is thoughts come second, in whichever way one wishes to define thoughts. But I have found that, setting that argument aside, that the feelings, whether they be generated from direct experience of the senses, or whether they're interactions with people, the feelings seem to me to come first, and then conceptualizations come second.
Super. Leo, what a pleasure. I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Okay, I since I prepped by watching, I already have this answer, and that is that uh, I have the internal dialogue with myself. I then have an external dialogue with someone, whether it's my wife, whether it's a friend, whether it's classmates or whatever. And then I go back inside. So it's a kind of complex dialogue among many different kinds of people.
That is so cool. And no one ever admits usually that they watched one in advance. When I started doing this 40 years ago, I didn't want people to hear the questions. But
Yeah,
now
yeah,
they're all live. There's so many online.
yeah,
Anybody can watch any of them. So no,
yeah,
that's cool. Because Mcluhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it.
yeah,
Joan
yeah.
Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. But this idea of going inside, then going outside, then going back inside, that's
Yeah,
really a beautiful three-step thing.
yeah, yeah.
So can humans think without language?
Again, it depends on what you mean by think. Can they conceptualize in a propositional form? My answer, always provisionally, is no. The language definitely structures propositional thought. But obviously, the at least so far in my sort of amateur-ish way of looking at anthropology, it does seem as if that humanoids, even before the language, are able to form some sort of cognitive process. That's just the nature of the brain. So, you know,
Chomsky says that a language is not just words. Sounds like he
yeah,
listened to you. It's a culture. It's a
yeah,
tradition.
exactly,
It's a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
exactly.
Leo, Leo, what do you do when language breaks down? When language doesn't work, what do you do?
Well, you see, all right. Depends on what you mean by language. So,
Yeah,
for instance, if words fail, which sometimes happens, then grunts take over.
right.
If grunts don't take over, unfortunately, there are what might be called antisocial behaviors that express whatever the feelings are that the situation has generated. So that could go anywhere from slamming a door to unfortunately slamming somebody in the face.
Right. But I mean, you said it well. What do you do? You were making observations what humans do,
Right.
but what do you do? What's one go-to method you do?
Okay. I'll give you a couple of examples that may tell a story, I suppose. But all right. Now you have to understand that when I was a freshman in high school, I had to take typing as a subject, and I'm very happy that I had that. However, I was a mediocre typing, but it was the typewriter's fault. It was never mine. So after cursing the typewriter out for all the errors it committed, I couldn't help but smash the darn thing to bits. So so for me, after the cussing came the physical expression of my anxiety and anger and frustration. Um, Now that was when I was in high school and early college. Uh, these days, if words fail, I just turn on my heels and walk away.
Right. Walk away. That's good. All right. So, your observation, well, you already did. Okay. So, two questions from Alan Turing.
Okay,
1950s.
right.
Is thinking a function of the soul?
It depends on what you mean by soul. There are people who don't believe there's such a thing as a soul. If the soul is considered an emotional, the emotional state, the psychological state, then consistent with the answer I gave before, I would say that, in quote, thinking, whatever way one wishes to define it, is definitely an expression of that kind of soul.
The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Again, it's boy, oh boy, oh boy, you got probably the first thing I learned in the high school that I went to was define your terms. So
Yeah.
it depends on what thinking is. If
Yeah.
thinking is a matter of calculating, all you need are procedures to do that, whether they be the procedures of digital, or whether they be procedures of the human mind in arithmetic problems. Um, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Here's, I think it goes both ways. It's an interesting question I've just incorporated in the last couple of years. And I think it is about defining terms. But Leo, the whole thing is you put these questions into the context you want. So Lily Tomlin said reality is just a collective hunch. So it's a collective hunch when I say, do machines think? Yeah. Well, what do you mean by machines? What do you mean by think?
Yeah.
And it's a constant defining every question. We can psychoanalyze every question, and that's what I'm after. I'm
Right.
after the exact verbs. But again, you can put them into the context you want, because I mean, every question I ask, you can say, well, it depends on what you mean by this word,
Right.
which is fine. But I'm saying it's more like, yeah, I mean, I think machines can think machine thinking, but they can't necessarily think human thinking completely.
But again, Jared, cognition has so many different
Yeah.
aspects to it. So I
Yeah.
mean, to narrow cognition down to this one word, thinking. Yes, on
Yeah.
the one hand, it does allow an expansive answer that a questioner, I should say that an answerer can take any which way.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that most folks, when you talk about thinking, you're talking about declarative sentences. I went to the store is a declarative sentence.
Yeah.
Can a machine do a declarative? Would a computer do a declarative sentence? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether one wants to limit cognition to that one narrow aspect, even in answering the question, because
Yeah. That was good, because I skipped this question because you sort of already answered it, but it's a good, leveling ground for our proceeding on. I was going to say, in your observations of humans, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings? Now, it's a stupid question because you can't separate
right.
thinking from feeling, but we invented the words thinking and feeling, so we think we can separate them. And Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. How do you shut your brain off completely? It's like when people are meditating. Okay, now think about not thinking. So, I mean, you handled that, but a couple of these questions, philosophical at the beginning, are this more or that more. So it's like one lady responded, you can't, the word more doesn't function in your question. And I go, well, that's great. She really tackled the
Yeah.
wording of the question. So it's more like the question is it more thinking or more feeling, is a jumping off point for you to tackle whatever you want in that aspect. So
Mhm.
that's just to put it in context, because the next one is, do
Okay.
you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Um, happiness meaning. Um, I cannot be pinned down to an either or in this situation
Yeah.
because they are they equate to the same thing. For when I am happy, it is a deep feeling um, of connection with people, places, and things, which exactly is what meaning is, in my estimation. So
Yeah.
it's not a continuum where you have on the one end um, meaning, on the other hand happy,
Yeah.
rather, and you're kind of in the middle somewhere. Uh, but they are essentially human characteristics that combine and simultaneously are in existence.
Yeah, because I got it from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He basically said happiness is fleeting, it might not last, but meaning seems to last. So
Okay. Well,
it's the
there's also another thing, if I might interrupt, because happiness seems to have a focus these days. Everybody's wondering, how can
yeah,
I be happy? Well, usually, at least from what I can gather, happiness is being termed as joy.
yeah,
So I'm a chocoholic. I am incredibly happy when I'm eating, when I'm consuming almost any kind of chocolate, and you know. That's one way of looking at happy. But over the decades, I've come to believe that happiness is a direct product of psychological well-being.
yeah,
That
good.
if an individual is in some way healing or healed in the psychology of who he or she is, then there's a contentment, there is a happiness
Yeah,
that transcends. Um, Although, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing that transcends chocolate, but nonetheless, that will eventually transcend this absolutely God-given food.
yeah. Really well put. I agree with you. And so, does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're kind of detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
My suspicion, and again, I'm only suspicion. I haven't gone into any great study on this, but consciousness consciousness is a byproduct of neurological function. So attention being paid to, from right now, for instance, I'm trying to formulate I'm trying to formulate a coherent response. So in my working memory, I'm trying to bring up all sorts of things that I think are pertinent and reject other sorts of things. Now, to me, that's consciousness,
Yeah,
but it's also a direct product of the workings of the neurology of the brain. So again, it's a synergy. It's
yeah,
not an either or along a continuum.
yeah. Really good. Leo, you really get, and I love when you say, I'm after hunches, guesses, intuition, impulse. But at the same time, the way you described that, as I'm trying to talk right now, my brain is going, "Chuk, chuk, 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 what am I going to say? What's going to come out?" I mean, you really communicated the last one to me so clearly.
Thank
And
you.
again, another stupid one. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
It depends on which car you're driving. Uh, because certainly the older I've gotten, the slower the speed of thought when reacting to the speed of a traffic light. turning from green to red or red to green. So to be a bit more precise in answering your question, to be honest with you, it's a toss-up.
Yeah, that reminded me of the great line from the film Repo Man. It says, "The more you drive, the less intelligent you are."
I can,
Think, you know,
yeah, I can see that.
yeah, you think of all your brain cells wasted on making decisions. The other one I love is, ever wonder how much Rolodex space you waste in your brain just memorizing movie star names?
Well, that's one of the things about the current ability to stream, because now you can stream a single movie or TV program over and over and over and over again, and just that repetition would be able to. Whereas, when I was a kid, you had to go to you had to pay your money to go see a film,
Yeah,
and unless you were really, really starstruck, you had no idea who other than the people who are
right.
up on the
Yeah,
billboards.
yeah. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. That's Audre Lorde, the poet.
Right.
Yvonne Rainer responded, "You can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?"
What new tool do I suggest? Okay. I don't suggest any new tool. The tools that the Greeks gave us through the phonetic alphabet, and Gutenberg put in the press, combined with the capacity, especially of English, to be able to differentiate. Well, Latin, Greek, Old Latin, Greek, eventually then Romance languages, to be able to discern the particular, enables the individuals to deconstruct and construct from all systems levels, whether it be a toaster, to a computer, to human management systems, or love and all the other romanticist kinds of ideas. The whole idea of literacy gives a power, of a tool that it will and has enabled the world. Of course, on the other hand, considering the way the world is today, I'm not exactly sure that was a great idea, but that's my answer.
That was good. It made me, I really appreciate the fact that you listen, because you accentuated the word new there. So people take that different ways. But what new toy do you suggest? Because you actually brought up the word toy earlier, and
Okay.
someone responded to me, because like I said, Leo, these questions are constantly growing and morphing. And when I said tool, they go, "Well, I can tell you new toy I suggest." So then I added it. Like, what new toy do you gravitate towards or suggest?
Toy. One of the unfortunate aspects of getting older is that the toys change. So right now, I'm far more interested in getting a Ferrari, rather than I have to, thinking about that. I have to tell you this. Speaking about such cars. So about, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so ago, 20, 30 years, so whatever it was, I was pestering my dear wife for a new car. And of course, toy, boys and their toys are always a fascinating topic. So again, I asked for a Mercedes. Didn't matter what kind, just as long as it was a Mercedes. So it was like Christmas was coming up, and so I was pestering her about getting a Mercedes for me for Christmas, and she did. But it was one of those Matchbox toys, one of the little. I cannot ever now say that my wife did not get me a Mercedes. So
That
so at this so at this point, as I said, boys and their toys. Whether it's a Lamborghini or a Maserati, that's another story, if I might. Again, boys and their toys. These days, I don't walk very well, so I don't walk very far. When I was walking, there were a lot of times I would be in Manhattan and walking through. So I think it was like 44th or 45th Street, something like that, on 6th Avenue. Came to a stop because the light was red. And in front of me, there were two fellas, probably in their early 30s. And all of a sudden, I wasn't paying attention. But then all of a sudden, I saw these two, and they were like glued. I mean, their eyes were popping open and everything. Here was a Hummer, one of the H2s, I believe it was, with a car carrier in the back, pulling a car carrier with a Corvette on it. Now, that was they were boys' toys, I'll tell you.
really good. I always welcome stories or anecdotes. So what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Going to sleep.
All right.
No.
That's good. We can move on.
No. Well, okay, if you want. I mean, there's no these days. There's nothing. I mean, how to put it this way? Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to the age where my mortality is staring me in the face, and I did have a health scare a few years ago that kind of put it really truly in my face. So that, yeah, I don't go to sleep worrying about dying, but it is something that is very close to the surface throughout the entire day.
Yeah. Okay, then bingo, we'll bring this one up. Can you forget to die?
Right now, absolutely not.
All right.
Absolutely not. No. I mean, the great thing is that I've lived my life without actually having to either face death, imminent death, or I mean, as it turns out, the health scare was only a scare. I've never been in combat, even though I've studied it, but I've never been in it. Yes, I've roamed around New York City in various times during the day and at night, but I've never been involved in anything other than a few little teenage schoolyard scraps. So I've been incredibly lucky in that
Yeah.
regard. However, I did see my mother die. I have being out in some places, either in Manhattan or when we were going down to Florida to visit my in-laws when they were there. I did see people die on the street. So I mean, death is not something that I'm unfamiliar with. But the good thing is that I've been lucky in not having to actually face it in an everyday kind of fashion.
Yeah.
So no, I mean the answer to the question is absolutely not. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Mcluhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're
Yeah.
broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so we might be able to cope with what we don't like about the inventions.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Okay, it depends. The answer to that will depend on what level of consciousness you wish to explore. So, from a media ecological point of view, we're talking about the predisposition of human beings to deny mortality. From another media ecology point of view, it is a matter of what has now become a great thing in the world today: confirmation bias. You whatever information is coming at you, you will agree with only that which is held prior.
Yeah.
But again, the thing is that depending upon, it's the, I don't know. I don't know about you, but I do know that it took me. I mean, in terms of my own personal denials, it took me an incredibly long time to recognize I had type 2 diabetes, because for the simple reason that I can't. I'm a healthy human being. I cannot have this disease. So if I feel I cannot, and I think I cannot, if I proposition I cannot, I therefore don't. And it took a long time for me to work through the denial, to accept the fact that I had type 2 diabetes, but there are ways by which it can be controlled,
Yeah.
and going through the regimen. So the human beings have this absolutely great capacity to only see what they want. I know it's been said many, many, many times, including Neil Simon, in not Neil Simon, although he too probably, but Paul Simon, in The Boxer. A man sees what he wants to see and disregards the rest. There you go.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, that's Subgenius line is pull the wool over your own eyes.
Exactly.
Do artists have moral obligation?
Ideally, yes, but in a commercial society, the only obligation that artists have is to be able to subsist in selling their art.
Are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
I'm afraid of immoral ideas.
Immoral ideas?
Both. Immoral, I am. And I guess you could call it unmoral. Or
You said moral ideas.
No, immoral.
You said immoral ideas. Okay, yeah. Leo, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Okay. To specifically answer the actual question, the answer is I can conjure up a memory, but whether it is the earliest memory, I'm not sure, because I've had an opportunity over the last couple of years to recollect this one particular activity, but I have not been. Again, listening to that question before, I've been trying to do that, and the only one that I keep on coming back to is the one that I will reference right now, and that is I went to an elementary. I'm sorry. I went to a nursery. What was called nursery school. Actually, it was what in today's parlance would be called a pre-kindergarten, kindergarten 2-year program, and they had a little kiddie pool, and in that kiddie pool, I and a fellow who has been my closest, longest friend ever, would play what we would call tugboat. So we would go in the pool, just us two, and at one time I would be a tugboat and he would be a steamboat, and I would butt him like around the stomach area gently, and then push him around, and then we would switch parts, and he would do the same. Now, as I said, I've been trying to think if there is any earlier memory than that. So I figured that would be like 3-4 years old, something like that.
That's good.
You know,
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
well, in the example that I used, it was a blessing. But on the other hand, I'll tell you, disclose this. Anything, let's do it this way. Anything that's a regret, which is essentially a memory, is disturbing. So yes, my father being the English teacher, let's back up one. I discovered poetry at the age of 10, and I thought it would be great to be a poet. So at 10 years old, I took and again, we were doing paper and pencil at that point, and I scratched out some lines. I took them to my father, and he was an English teacher. And so he essentially was trying the best he could to correct my 10-year-old verse. Well, the problem is that by doing that, he inadvertently sent me the message that I wasn't all that good at it. That memory of that one particular time and several others has stayed with me all my life. So on the one hand, yeah, the memory that I just shared of the tugboat being the tugboat in the kiddie pool, that was very enjoyable.
Yeah.
But his taking his red pen and scribbling the corrections, that memory is not. So again, like everything else, it's synergistic. It's not either or, it's both.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, you have to understand now. If I don't say my wife, I'm going to get in trouble, and we've been married now for well over 50 years, and so therefore I've stayed out of a lot of trouble. But I have to say again, going back to the story of disclosure on the regret that I have with my father, I think my father, by and large, has been the most influential in my life, both in terms of my intellectual / academic development, as well as being a father and other sorts of interpersonal relationships. As far as outside the family is concerned, probably the most of I had mentioned the fellow's name before, Peter Herototic. At the point where I met him, he was the director of the Master of Arts in Media Studies at the New School. Now, the reason why he was so important in my life is because he, more than any other person, other than perhaps the high school English teacher that I had, a brother Joseph, was the person who recognized who I was as a mind, and as a person who should be supported, whose mind should be developed, whose articulation of ideas and thoughts should be encouraged. I think that was crucial in trying to move me in my development as a human being.
Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Okay, the answer is yes and no. The Brooklyn community I was raised in was highly Roman Catholic. And both my mother and father were part of that tradition. So consequently, I was enrolled. The nursery school program I was enrolled in was a parish Catholic school program. The elementary schools that I went through were Roman Catholic. The high school I went through was Catholic. So it was more than just the family constellation that transitioned me through childhood into adolescence, into young adulthood. That was in the Roman Catholic tradition. But specifically, it started, yes, with family.
Do you pray?
Yes.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
You're saved.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Okay. Again, I heard this, and I've been thinking about it, and here's my response to that question. Evil is a word used by people who want to dehumanize the other.
Yes.
That its meaning is a way of stigmatizing people who they want to stigmatize. I think one of the whole business of Jekyll and Hyde from the very beginning, and of course, excuse me, the high schoolers don't really understand this. They're not old enough yet to understand many themes in other than this is the theme that you're supposed to know to pass the test, that human beings have both and
Yeah.
have degrees of both.
Yeah.
And that being human is being both at the same time.
Yep.
But as I said, as a word, it is used to dehumanize, to deny the other, to make enemies of the other.
Yep. I will read you really briefly what I love Harold Bloom said when they asked him, "Do you believe in God?" He says, "My attitude towards Yahweh is that I don't like him and I don't trust him and I wish he'd go away, but he won't because he's built into the language," as Nietzsche says.
Right, right, right.
Is yeah, so we built this word evil. But really, Leo, the hidden question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola
Mhm.
stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends
Right,
close
right.
and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Okay. This is the way I will answer that. Um, no human being is an enemy. It may be an adversary. They may want to kill you. May want to do even more horrible things to you. But an enemy is an individual who has lost, who the person looking for an enemy wants to dehumanize.
Yeah.
Once you take the step to define the other as an enemy, then you can do anything you want with that other person. Now, that does not mean that you cannot defend yourself or
Yeah.
defend other people. So again, there's something that I've over the years have asked people who I thought would not think me crazy answering the question. But it comes down to the same thing. Can you love Hitler?
Yeah.
And of course, the answer to most people is no, you can't. But I keep on saying, but you can love the man. You love the divine. You love yourself in the man.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you have to embrace the expressions of hatred that he engenders.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult. See, again, that's part of. Let's put it this way: if somebody's ready to punch you, I mean, literally, going to punch you in the mouth, you know, yeah, that person is not my enemy, but I'm darn sure going to try to defend myself.
Yeah.
But and I'm again, if I might go back, so freshman in high school, so there was this kid who picked on me, And I'm not a fighter, believe me. There are lots of reasons why not. But if this kid hit me, I was going to hit him back. As it turns out, the more I hit him back in class, not because he wanted to fight me after school, and I said, no, let's do it right here, right now. And so, but I hit him back, and he and I became the best of buds. So again, it's the idea is an enemy is someone who the person making into an enemy wants to deny the to deny the existence of the self in another human being.
Yeah. You really evoked two. Ram Dass, we used to say, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush. It's like
Yeah,
fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard
yeah,
time loving Putin or whatever.
yeah.
But the other one you brought up using this word dehumanize, I think Errol Morris's film Fog of War is really good, but
Yeah,
it humanizes a war criminal. A very wise person said, humanizing anyone is a good thing. So it
exactly.
really helped me realize that to look at it in a bigger picture.
Definitely.
So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, I'm out of here. This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can
Hmm.
go outside and see a
Yeah.
real tree? Faulkner years later said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism.
Hmm.
Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Because it's now, who was it that said the reflective life is not worth living or something like that?
Yeah.
Because, and it kind of gets back to something I think earlier in the conversation about art and artists, and that is that regardless of what it is, whether it be a play, a piece of music, a sculpture, or whatever, um, it highlights a particular aspect of being human that living um, just cannot raise to consciousness. And as a consequence, again, it's the old hold a mirror up to civilization kind of thing that art does. Now, again, we talked earlier about uh, how well people respond to the messages that are in plays and the meanings that are transmitted in pictures and stuff like that. But the idea is that these sorts of pieces of expression hold the mirror up into a specific way so that we can have the examined life.
Really well put. So, Leo, what was the tipping point for you to pursue your vocation? So, I was really impressed when I asked you before we started, you know, what's your career? What's your vocation? And you said conversation. And I was like, that's my career. No, that was like they asked Marcel Duchamp at a party. So what do you do? And he goes, I'm a breather. And I go,
Right,
hey, I'm
right.
a
Yeah,
breather too. We have something in common.
yeah.
Like I'm a conversationalist. But you know, where's your tipping point? What did you study in college? And where were you going to go? Well, I'm going to do this. And maybe where did you specifically kick over? And I'm going to study media ecology and conversation. So just maybe a couple tipping points.
Okay. And again, uh, this you asked a question earlier about memory, and this
Yeah.
is a nice segue in a way into further conversation about memory. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Now, the probably the first I'm sure we could, if we had the time, go deep into the psychology of being an only child. But I would suggest that the reason that I'm so geared towards, and almost pathologically so, towards conversation is because I'm an only child.
Yeah.
But we can kind of sort of set that aside, since you're looking for specific points, inflection points. Um, my feeling is that the first inflection point was, again, we talked about the my I didn't really talk about it, but I brought up the high school English teacher. He allowed us to talk. He allowed us to listen. He not just introduced the various pieces of the canon of high school English, but we also discussed it. We also talked about it. When we were doing Shakespeare plays, he had us act out if we thought we would want to do that. Um, that conversation that was in the classroom did a number of different things. One is that it showed me what it is that I felt really passionate about, really passionate for: conversation. It allowed me to have a context in which a conversation could be had. Now, in terms of going towards media and media ecology was concerned, I bounced around college, a number of different colleges, but the main point came with I was at one point a physical education major, and a cousin of mine was working at WFIL in Philadelphia. And so I would skip class to go down to hang out with my cousin. And of course, I don't know if you know WFIL. I don't even know if you knew it then, but it was a top 40 formatted radio station. And it was one of the biggest top 40 in the Philadelphia market. And so I was really, I was so that's where I decided I want to be a radio broadcaster. So that was one point. When I got when I finally got to the undergraduate program in broadcast that I graduated from, there were ideas that were circulating, and they were just sort of hinted at. There was this fellow called Marshall Mcluhan that sounded interesting. And so the question was, okay, what am I going to do with this? And all of a sudden, I said, well, let me see what the schools around, the graduate programs were around. And that's when I found Peter Haratonic. That's when I found the New School. And then, boom, then we're off. And then through Peter, then I got really super into the media ecology, and it just clicked. I mean, it just perfect. This is exactly what I was thinking. This is exactly what I wanted to do. And so since Peter was involved in the NYU media ecology program, then I got introduced to the folks there. And since, again, and we talked about my family background as educators, it was a case of, okay, where am I going to have this conversation? Where am I going to have this conversation? And it's going to be in the classroom. Going back to the high school, it's in the classroom. So where in the classroom are we going? Which classroom are we going to have the conversation? And that had to be at the college level. So how am I going to get there? And that's why I went through the doctoral program at NYU in media ecology.
Beautiful. Well, Leo, and just tell us really briefly, you got to hang out with Edmund Carpenter and say the amazing part of the Mcluhan universe. Huge.
Right.
Tell me just one thing specifically how Edmund Carpenter shaped your behavior, an epiphany you got from, an insight, something that, touched you. And,
Well, because all right, let's take one step back. I would not classify or categorize my involvement with a man as hanging out. I wish I did. I tried to, but I lost contact with him very shortly after the course ended. I did have a number of different conversations with him outside of the classroom. So, but it was still a professor-student kind of relationship. As what he presented to me was the the animation of his book, Oh What a Blow. And I think if anything that I took away from it was a deeper understanding of the idea than later that I came across with Walter Ong's Orality and Literacy, and and again the idea that the native peoples up in the Arctic region have a number of different ways of saying snow is cute, but it's a deeper understanding of what an oral culture in a particular geographic or topographical environment allows. So it was more a case of, as I said, anima and getting a sense of the person and his ideas that were encapsulated in the book. Oh, What a Blow.
What a great book. Oh, what a blow the Phantom gave me. So two of my film heroes say their mantra, George Manupelli says, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. I know it's a stupid question and it's both and it depends, but just your jumping off point. Is art making more self-expression or more that you're a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, and environments are dominant?
Well, certainly from the media ecology perspective, being that it's a highly technological determinist point of view, the answer would be that you're a vehicle. However, I mean, all of a sudden, it's funny. All of a sudden, the idea of a prism jumps into mind, and that is that light through a prism splits the frequencies into different forms of light. The prism is, even though yes, there is this incredible shaping force from technology or technologies, as well as culture and family and school and other sorts of things, but the individual is the prism through which the light. So on the one hand, yes, you have the individual expressing the cultural markers of individual cultures and technologies, but through the prism of an individual lens.
Can art making be egoless?
No, absolutely not. No, because the whole art is the, at least from my point of view, art is the externalization of whatever it is that the artist is feeling, thinking. It's you cannot divorce, at least from my perspective anyway, you cannot divorce the self from the expression of it in any particular form that we call art.
What was the motive of the cave artist?
Well, since I wasn't alive at the time, I'm not sure. but certainly my speculation would be actually of several. As a all right, as a person so extraordinarily affected by phonetic alphabetic print literacy, I would have to say that it's a recording of interest of the individual artist in a form that he or she chose. However, as a media ecologist, I would also make room. I would even say that's not correct, but rather a fully social expression of the interconnectedness of whatever it is that's being pictured to the immediate presence of the individual as an expression of the tribal sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, because it really led to this. I'm curious about competition. Are we hardwired for competition? And it actually leads into what is the function of heroism. So this is Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, you don't know really who won or lost, but you can tell who a hero is and who is not. Now, I read that to someone and I like what it brings up. And they said, well, villains don't think they are bad, they want control. Heroes want freedom. So it entails a lot, but it's just this idea of making art. Is it competitive? Like, oh, I've got to make art better than this person or that person. And is that healthy? And then this, what is the function of heroism? Why did we develop this thing of heroes? Because if games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning, because you don't really know who won or lost, but you can tell who a hero is or not. So
Yeah.
it tells a lot, but go ahead.
Okay. Okay. For those who follow Campbell, a hero has a very specific meaning,
Yeah.
and that, in my mind, again, maybe not in Campbell's, but in my mind, it is um, the illustration of the epitome of what a human is supposed to be. Now, the question of the success, the question of failure, the questions of heroes and villains, the good guys, the bad guys, the black hats, the white hats. It's all, you know, the competition is, and again, from a media ecology point of view, competition is an expression of the literate mind, not the oral mind. The oral mind considers cooperation as the ideal and necessary existence for existence. Literate men, literate human beings, literate human beings have divorced themselves from the lived world, and or another way of saying it is objectified the world and deem it necessary to dominate it. And part of the natural world is human beings. So the idea of a hero as overcoming natural forces or forces, any force that's arrayed against them, and again, heroes, villains, and all the rest of this stuff, is just a projection of the objectification of the life circumstance of human beings in a literate society. Are we by nature cooperative, or are we by nature competitive?
Yeah.
And my basic answer from a media ecology point of view is it depends on the dominant communication technologies of the time.
That is good. I'm trying to refine that because it jumps all over the place, and it is good. It is.
I have a tendency to do that, by the way.
Yeah. Well, no, you helped me focus in on like what the potential question could be. But this is my oldest question: what's more important, conviction or compromise?
What's more important? Okay. Again, I heard this too, and I've been trying to figure out a cogent answer, and I have none. Because it really is, to me, there are basic fundamental truths. Um, I mean, they're trite, you know, what we used to say back in the 60s, peace, love, and understanding, that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. But then there are situational necessities. The question is, do we violate our basic truths in order to ameliorate whatever problems exist in the situation? And the answer to that is it depends on your life. What I mean
Yeah.
by that is this. Um, to be very honest with you, my career as an academic has been successful in keeping my principles whole. But by keeping my principles whole, it has dug holes in my wallet. So,
Yeah.
am I supposed to give up um, the basic tenets of who I am and who I think I want to be in conversation with my students for the sake of keeping a job, or or what? And the pleasure of this my situation, and to say the gosh honest truth, incredibly lucky I am that I've not had to violate my principles in order to keep a job, for the simple reason that my wife has had a very successful career as an apparel designer. And while we've not been rolling in dough, we've been, you know, over the years, comfortable enough to allow me the idealism of that position. There's when I was learning how to be a teacher, there was this book, I believe it was by Ted Sizer, called Horace's Compromise. And essentially, what it says is, in order to sustain a career in education, you do need to adjust and adapt to the circumstances of the job. Well, I couldn't do that. And the good thing is that my wife was able to support me in not giving in and having to compromise my basic truths and who I am and what I thought I needed from each situation. Um, so, what's more important? It depends on. It depends if you have a supportive wife or some other way by which you can move through the world without starving.
Yeah. Well put. Tell me one major element, just briefly, of your vocation that's changed and one major element that stayed the same in the years you've done this.
Well, again, depending on if we're talking about conversation as the vocation, it's a matter of that stays completely the same. What has changed about that is the students, the way, or actually the contexts in which students, the college students especially, have been acculturated. Early on in my teaching career, I was able to actually hold conversations where I would facilitate conversation regardless of what the topic was. I mean, with the exception of how to cue a record. I mean, you know, where there's not much to talk about and how to cue a record and you know how to do that kind of stuff. But when talking about laws or regulations and the histories and broadcasting and stuff like that, you know, there's conversations to be had. And during the 70s and the early 80s, teaching, I was able to do that. But beginning, somewhere in the 90s and then in the 2000s. The students who I was having, all they wanted to do was to hear what I had to say, and that's it. Just copy what I had to say from the board, and the notes and stuff like that, and that's it. Whatever conversation there was held somewhere else out, and not including me. So that pretty much has changed. As far as I think that's probably the best way for me to answer that one.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength. Rather, we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Again, I heard that, and I kept on thinking about it because it's one of those sorts of questions that I have had in job interviews. And to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure why in the world anybody would want to know in the first place. And second of all, the why interviewers would want to know that, I'm at a loss. But I would prefer to do it this way, and to not so much deflect the question, but to suggest that that an individuals in quote there aren't any individual separatable in quote weaknesses and strengths. They
Yeah.
are People are synergistic. They
Yes.
combine stuff. So I have been from the very beginning of my conversational career, what my erstwhile friends say categorize me as verbose. And I
Yeah.
agree. I'm incredibly wordy.
Yeah.
But early on also, I noticed that when I write, I'm fairly, over the years, while I have maintained that verbosity, and I go all over the place in talking, which is kind of strange when you think that I'm standing up in front of a classroom of students trying to make sense out of the world. But still, the more that I the more that I wrote, the greater the capacity to be terse. Now,
Yeah.
that's
That's good.
fine, but again, it's a synergy. It's a growth. It's not okay. Well, I had this weakness I have this weakness for chocolate, and now
Yeah.
I'm eating less chocolate than I did when I was 15, or I
Yeah.
had a real weakness for well, here's another good one. I have a real weakness for a particular brand of Scotch whiskey because my father was the one who drank it. But now I don't like Scotch whiskey, and so I mean, it's like you know,
No, you tackled it well, Leo, and I tell you, it really evoked a line I love from Marcel Duchamp. He said, "There's no solution because there's no problem." And so it sounds mamby-pamby or like
yeah,
but it's actually, well, what is this is just your key word I'm getting is synergy. This
yeah,
is what
yeah,
life is. It's
yeah,
synergy.
yeah.
So T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Well, um, inner dialogue is uh, the inner dialogue that stays inside the head. It might be characterized as causes if you're thinking in terms of writing. they're in clauses. They're prepositional clauses. They're whatever you want to. They're clauses. If you're thinking about externalization of thought, then it's prose.
Yeah.
And within the prose form, by virtue of inclination and academic training, it's what might be called philosophical inquiry.
Yeah. Is perception reality?
Well, okay. Here's yes. I have made this point over and over and over again. Perception is reality. However, the comeback that points to another direction says to me, but when I stub my toes, and believe me when I tell you, I do that often, it hurts. That's reality, man. That's not the perception of pain. It hurts.
It is pain.
So I mean, it's like, yes, on one level, and again, again, we go back to another theme that has been raised recently. Schrodinger's cat. The cat in the box, alive or dead. Well, so here, perception and reality, depending upon which way you want to define reality, no, everything is a matter of observation, and the human being has the capacity to observe, but observes what the human being wants to observe. Again, going back to man hears what he wants to hear, etc. So, but it says keep on coming back. But when I stub my toes, it hurts.
Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When I curse stubbing my toes.
That is good.
But okay. I think but to be a bit slightly more serious, human, at least in terms of me, when I get angry, again, using the idea of stubbing toes, yeah, I mean, I curse and do all sorts of mean, nasty things. I try not to do it to my wife because that just is not a good idea on any level. But it strikes me that there has to be some sort of release. Whether, I mean, at one point I had, well, okay, as a kid, way back in the late 50s, early 60s, rock and roll, as probably more than myself and a whole lot of others, was really getting started, and especially with the Beatles coming in, everybody and his brother and sister wanted to play guitar. So my folks got me a guitar. I really wasn't interested. But when I turned 15, what I wanted to do was be a drummer, and I got a set of drums. And therein, when I got angry, I went down. I mean, even when I wasn't angry, but when I was angry more than anything else, all I did was I went downstairs into the basement where the drums were and pounded the living daylights out of them. So, anger needs some form of pro-social expression. And that was one way. And unfortunately, there were lots of different barriers. I wanted to be a rock and roll drummer and never got the real opportunity to. Today, matter of fact, in the room that I'm in here, the drums, another set that I bought a while ago, are still here. And while I think I have other ways of handling anger better, I'm still pounding on the drums.
Cool. I like that. So we got about 10 more minutes. It's really been fun. These are 5 Alan Watts questions.
Okay.
Just off the top of your head in a few words. The first one is, who started it all?
I give up. Is that a trick question? I have no idea.
Are we going to make it?
No.
Where do we put it?
I respectfully refrain to answer that.
Very good. Who's cleaning it up?
I ain't, that's for sure.
Fifth question. Is it serious?
Always, but never.
There's a saying, Leo, that goes, you create what you resist. And I'm not saying you, Leo, but one creates what one resists. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. Any thoughts on this line? You create what you resist.
Okay. One of the ways I'd like to answer that is to look at a magnet. Magnet has two poles. If you put two magnets together, the opposite poles will click. But if you put two magnets together with the same poles, they'll shunt apart. This is the way I see it. There are two ways of going. You either run to or run away from.
Yeah.
This is I've had over the decades, I've had to deal with a number of different situations where young people are either running towards self-destruction or running away from self-destruction. And it is very difficult to say which is the way that an individual is going to decide to go. The fear is that an individual will embrace self-destruction because what the hell? I don't want to live anyway. Might as well just go and get it over with. On the other hand, it's a case of also let's, I'm so scared of living, but I'm too afraid to die.
Yeah.
And again, I come back to the word. It's not an either or. It's synergistic. Because in many ways, we do both. So for me, one of the ways that I have run towards self-destruction is by overeating. One of the ways I have run away from it, if you will, is by dieting. So since I was a kid, I'm bouncing up and down between overeating and dieting. Now, that's not healthy, of course not. But again, it's both.
Yep. If you're walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I could not say a word because the 12-year-old self wouldn't listen, even if I said all the wisest things in the world.
You are one honest person, Leo. This has been a joy. How do you find peace of mind?
Peace of mind. Okay. There are a number of different tricks I have. Probably the best one I've found so far is meditating or contemplation, kind of like the same thing.
Yeah.
We were down in North Texas for a while and things weren't going very well. And so I decided, well, let me take a look-see and about what this thing is. I read a lot and then started to go through the process and felt, this seems to work. The other thing at the same time, I was looking at what are called relaxation exercises, which essentially is the same thing. And so the combination of these relaxation exercises, which kind of put me into the frame of meditation or contemplation, that seems to work for me.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Drown.
On what occasion do you lie?
When it's going to hurt somebody.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
I never want.
Yeah, it's good. You never had it, but you never want it.
Well, it's good. Well, again, you use the word want, and that gets to be tricky. What's good? Again, good is relative. Okay. No, that's a good question. Because again, good is relative. Because I would, off the top of the head, I would say at this point, I was going to say hemorrhoids, but they're not good.
Right.
but at this point, I really don't know.
I thought you were going to say a real. I thought you were going to say a real Mercedes.
No, because that, you see, again, the qualifier is want.
Yeah.
What, and again, the thing is that, so yeah, I want I want a '68 Corvette. That's fine.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that it's a gas guzzler, and so now that's not good anymore. Or going back to the situation where the guy with a Hummer and a Corvette, I mean, yeah, man, that would be fantastic to have, but it's not good anymore.
Yeah.
So I mean,
the answer I get the most is fame, money, and heroin.
Really?
Yeah,
No,
it's
I really don't want. Now, money I wouldn't mind having, but again, money, a whole lot of money is that. I had an uncle, if you don't mind, I had an uncle who did not want to win a lot of money in the lottery for the simple reason that it would be a pain in the neck because everybody and his brother would be out for sharing the prize. My response to him was, man, I'd love to have that problem. But I mean, winning a $1 billion, I'm not exactly sure how good that is, but I wouldn't mind trying.
Yeah. 3 more, we're out of here. What a pleasure. Thank you, Leo.
Okay.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Well, it's got to be the environment. Okay, let's. I was going to say right off the bat, environmental movement, but let's just call it the social justice movement, because social justice has this broad definition now that includes environment, includes racial justice, includes all the other kinds of really great things to allow people to live well together on a planet that actually sustains life rather than destroys it.
Beautiful. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Living, loving, and being loved.
Oh, wow. That's really good. My hero is Eden Abe. He wrote a song called Nature Boy.
Right.
The line is, the greatest lesson you'll ever learn is to love and be loved in return.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the last question is what gives you the most optimism?
At this point, at this age, living the next day without pain, both in terms of physical pain, without emotional pain, and just being able to live, love, and be loved.
Yeah. It's really amazing because, you start off with, I always go, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions. Right off the bat, you hit it out of the park. It was right because the first question is what's the best thing for a human being? And my friend studied Wilhelm Reich and says the
Right.
best thing for a human being is another human being.
Exactly.
And then they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life, what gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's full circle because you started with the companionship, which is a great word.
Yep.
So, Leo, what a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been a delight.
Thank
I've
you.
really learned a lot and I appreciate it. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep the conversation going forever and ever.
Well, I wouldn't mind being around forever and ever, but it's not going to happen that way. But definitely the conversation's got to roll on. And thank you. And thank you, Jerry. It was a pleasure. And hopefully maybe we can do this again sometime.
I would love it. Thank you so much, Leo.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.